few interesting things about Onchain games, but one thing that is interesting is that it's basically empower creativity. So every Onchain games can be a platform for developers. So it's not only a game and users, it's someone building something very basic, a lot of developers built on top, and a lot of users. So, you know, the reason why stuff like Shopify, for example, gets a lot of users is because a lot of businesses are coming, and the same goes for AWS, so, and the same goes for Ethereum. And so I think every Onchain game is like a platform for developers that can, you know, make the design space much bigger and give many more people, you know, a real ownership, because they decide the rule of their game on top of the game. So that's one of the reasons that I'm excited about.
The reason why Kano and I are passionate about building worlds on blockchain is because I think game companies make software artifacts that provide entertaining value, but they don't necessarily think about having these worlds, enforcing the rules autonomously, or making the companies themselves irrelevant to the worlds that they build. When we build worlds on the blockchain, our mentality is we want to have these worlds survive longer than company or individuals, even longer than nation states, right? So it's really not about making games anymore. It's about making an alternative reality where people can build and share experiences and find recognition and ownership. So yeah, that's the holy grail that we're building towards.
Yeah, I think, like, for me, games comes in many forms. You know, I think, you know, guiltygyoza, you touched upon, like, virtual worlds and stuff, but I think the games could come from basically, you know, gamification, right? It could be one of the simplest thing to incentivize someone in a business or something, make the mundane more interesting, right? And I think, you know, with blockchain gaming, you're kind of adding all these layers of, you know, an equity part of it, right? Where you essentially, you get buy-in, you have accountability to the game itself, right? Because you put your money where your mouth is. And I think, you know, ownership is a really big thing, right? Provenance, right? You essentially can extract value from what we think is like fundamental properties of, you know, blockchain games, you know, and you tack on that with all the hedonistic values and like all the excitement that comes with games and gamification, and you essentially run through games. So.
And so what are kind of a first principle when it comes to Onchain gaming? Like what defines an Onchain game versus a non-Onchain game? Who wants to take it? I feel like Guilty is like into it. It's a hard one. I can feel like he has the vibe of philosopher. He always has a very. I like it. Sorry, go ahead. Let's go karma. Let's go karma. It's a sign. Yeah. I messed it out. Sorry.
Well, I think there's this notion of hyperstructure, right, where the creators of these things that live in a blockchain have autonomy in themselves, and so the creators become irrelevant almost to their creation. That's just not possible with how the game industry works, how they structure their business model, how shareholders expect their growth, etc., etc., etc. But now on the blockchain, especially when we're coding everything core to the game mechanics or to the mechanics of the world itself in pure smart contract terms and removing backdoors, leaving them immutable, now it becomes a possibility. So there's a mentality shift between building something that you can think about extracting value from to building something that will just become, it's like perhaps like raising a kid. Eventually it grows up and it's another individual that is just equal terms with you, not an affiliate to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I don't want to be like the gatekeeper of what is a blockchain game, right? Well, like, you know, we do see, unfortunately, a lot of companies, they'll like adopt blockchain just to name drop, hey, we're like a blockchain thing. But I also think it's important that, you know, we shouldn't limit like how much or how little is on the blockchain when it comes to their games, you know? Because my view is that once you're, you know, starting to build on the blockchain, it's almost like a gateway drug that, you know, we want you to start off, you know, maybe you're just posting, you know, maybe like parts of your data on chain, right? But that can really expand. You can suddenly have your trading on chain. You can have like in-game marketplaces, whatever you want. And I think it's important that we allow all of them to build as blockchain games. And I don't want to limit where that starts or stops.
I'm not sure it's exactly the question, but I mean it's quite similar to what I said before, but it's basically interesting to see what we can achieve if people don't need to build stuff twice. So in DeFi, people only basically didn't innovate a lot. Basically, creating like 5 types of smart contracts, and then we have like $200 billion of DeFi industry. And then like if games was the same, and people wouldn't need to build the map twice, the VRF twice, all of these components twice, who know where we can be? If people like just share stuff and use each other's stuff in order to make more progress. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's like one specific thing that makes a Web3 game. I think for an on-chain game, I think it's a spectrum for sure, and I think it's more about like how do you adapt your game to build on the ethos of what blockchain and Web3 is, which is, I'm just going to spit out some words here, like equity, right? You want to have inclusive accountability, you want to have ownership, you want to funnel revenue back to your players, and I think there's in a way like a natural progression to this, where you can start off very simply, have your off-chain game mechanics with tools and engines that you are familiar with, and then you simply just move to basically the ownership of assets on chain, right? And you start off with very, very simple economies where you're essentially just tracking ownership and trading it between people, right? And then over time, you can have to have more on-chain mechanics, etc. Right? So it's kind of like a spectrum of things, but as long as you focus on giving value and revenue back to your players, what we're essentially the owners and are invested into the game, that is what I think.
And so I'm gonna ask you for a hot take. So you choose either your bull case for on-chain gaming or your bear case for on-chain gaming. One of the two. You don't choose one.
So I guess I'm very bullish with on-chain gaming because I think, as I said before, it's a spectrum, firstly, of what on-chain gaming looks like. And at the same time, it's kind of like you have all the fun of an on-chain game, and I think this is where we still need to put in a lot of work, which is like the user experience side, right? We definitely don't want to get to a point where, let's say we want to add utility to every interaction to have this sort of provenance chain, and in every single point of interaction you have like the need to sign your MetaMask or something. Like I'm sure everyone here is familiar with like the pains of having to sign multiple times within one different session, with some kind of DeFi app. So I think I'm very bullish on it, but I think there's a big part here to improve the user experience, both from like the trading economy side, but also the on-chain mechanics that I guess MatchboxDAO has been working on as well. Yeah.
I guess the bull case that on-chain games will bring Ethereum to a billion people, and I'm not thinking about it from the point of view that a billion people will use the game. I'm thinking about it that a lot of developers will build stuff on top of what we have that will collectively reach a billion people on Starkware. And yeah, I was thinking about the developers. I'm not thinking about the users, because the developers are like each of them can bring it to infinite amount.
Right. So I think at Topology we have a quite specific definition of what on-chain worlds can be. Other than rule sets that are autonomously enforced, another core feature that we are striving for is interoperability and compostability, which are words that we throw around quite a lot, but it's actually very difficult. Not just difficult because you have to navigate interest groups, but difficult strictly in the technical terms. One thing that Tim Sweeney talked about years ago was that there's an ideal to make open metaverse, and we need to tackle first and foremost open standards for interoperability to even be possible. And it's a hard problem because a lot of the tech stack are based on file formats getting transferred between different components of the game engine, for example. example, and the file formats are kind of a mess. Whenever you use JSON file format, it's just a messy file format. But there's a lot of legacy that's built into how games are being built. So I think it's a very tough technical problem. So I'm actually a little bit bearish in the short term horizon problem.
I like that.
I'm bearish in the short term
the
because
bearish. I like the bearish case. I was my hot take. I like it.
it's bearish because I think we are probably underestimating the skill of and the difficulty of actually achieving composable and interoperable worlds. But we're 100% bullish we can do it in long term.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to the standard take, which is bullish. What we're seeing, like especially with Starknet and Cairo and everything, and even the team at like Topology, what they've been able to achieve and build in like Starknet, which hasn't been possible on Ethereum L1s because of costs and stuff. We're realizing there's a whole new like almost genre of like applications that you can do, and I think that's really going to be exciting to see how that evolves. Fundamentally, blockchain games are always going to have limitations. Like you have to wait for commit time. They're going to be you have to build them generally async in nature. And once we get to the stage where we're able to design these games around the fundamental limitations of blockchain, and while also combining the advancements we're seeing on Starknet and Cairo and all these this new genre, I think I'm bullish.
Okay, and so there is a bunch of new devs in this room. Looking at you like you are gods, knowledge, wise men, and people of knowledge. What would you advise them to do, to build, to try, if you were to start today?
Just build. I tell that to everyone, but I see a lot of people. They feel like I need to start. I need to study first. I need to do this first. I need that first before I start building my thing. I tell people just build. Fail, build, try again. It's better to fail and have tried than it is to never try before building. So that's my take.
I like it, and if you want to be bold, just come to me. I can help.
Yeah. What about you guys?
I think Louis has been seen as an ATM. A little bit intimidating. I think my advice would be. I think my advice would be quite some people have talked to me about what to do with Cairo, and I think one of the interesting advice I might be able to give is just follow where your intuition leads, instead of thinking what the market needs, because that will give you the fundamental drive to push forward, especially Cairo is a pretty low level language. So if you just want to build something that can get you traction and you're just painfully learning about Cairo, that's not going to work, I think. So follow the intuition.
I would say try to solve guiltygyoza self-domain puzzles. This is one. And participate in Matchbox weekly calls until you have an idea. And then tell me and I'll give you money.
You get a phone on me.
Yeah, I guess it comes, it could just be for example, Immutable X. You could start off building, just simply minting your assets on Immutable X, right? And being able to trade it, for example. But yeah, I would say just find something that you're passionate about, and again, I think games are a spectrum. So if you find a very small part of your system or something you're interested in that you can gamify, for example, or you can add some layer of ownership to it, then go for it, right? And then over time, you can start to talk to other collectives like MatchboxDAO, Immutable, and all the other projects, and you start to get more inspiration of how we can maybe build more composable different games, right? Let's say your little gamification part with someone else's, and then you start to link these all together, and you have this network of games and ownership you transfer all around, right? I think, yeah.
I just want to make a few, by the way, announcement, comment on this, sort of thing that I don't think everyone is going to know when it comes to Starknet and Cairo. First of all, we expect to get recursive proofs relatively soon. And by soon, I mean within 3 months, which would unlock roughly infinite scale when it comes to proving. Then you have the sequencer scale. By the way, when it comes to the sequencer, I want to point out that there is Eileen over there, So if you want to blame the gateways, it's her, and we'll talk to her because she's basically the person who control every transaction coming in. I don't make the rules. And the last bit is we are expecting decentralization to kick in Q1 2023, and which means that we will have open source provers, which means that you can have local client-side provers. And so this is something that you should have in mind, that whatever you're building right now in Cairo and going to run on the network can tomorrow be run locally. And while this is far away, like 6 to 9 months from now, right, something like this, you should still start thinking about what can be done once I have this tool. What can I do now that I have this super powerful tool? So this is just a small announcement, like reminder of sort of the roadmap that we at Starkware have in mind when it comes to starting Cairo. And so I guess my other question is sort of Cairo can be, obviously here all of us are talking Cairo. Right? Like there's gaming and Onchain, Cairo at the moment, maybe tomorrow something else, but today it's Cairo. So kind of a sort of assumption here on the table. So my question to you also for new dev is what is like to be on Cairo? What is like to build using this new environment and infrastructure? You have the mic, you start.
I think like it's nowhere near yet, I would say, the level of like I guess convenience to build with Solidity and on stack. But I think I've seen a ton of activity on Discord, on like the core stars in the Telegram group as well. Like a ton of people are building tooling to help bridge that user experience gap. I think we do understand from the Immutable perspective of why Cairo was built, right? Versus like let's say if you have equivalents, and it's for essentially the efficiency side. And we can kind of see how the priorities for Starkware has been developing for more like offering the scale and the general computation to more decentralization in the future. And we resonate with that, right? And I think as a product company, we also think in like this broader long-term sense of credible neutrality, where if you have to make compromises in, let's say, I think you touched on decentralization early on, then if it's for the sake of the user experience or providing essentially just better user experience to our users, then it's a position that we will gradually take and over time centralize as well. So yeah.
I just want to make one comment also about what he said. He talked about the core stars. He violated the first rule of the core stars. You should not talk about it, and he might be kicked out. Although all of you wants to get in, so we can discuss it afterwards.
So I think for anyone who wants to seriously build in Cairo, it will be beneficial for you to read the ETH-Start paper, not actually the Cairo CPU paper, the ETH-Start paper, because if you read the Cairo CPU paper, you feel like you're studying instruction sets, all that stuff. But once you study the ETH-Start paper, you start to understand you're actually building on the mathematical machine, not a binary memory access machine anymore. And that just gives you way better intuition that you're actually programming in terms of math constraints. Right. On top of that, I think Cairo is just a miracle. I think we've heard from the various industry leaders that even just 5-6 years ago, people thought a highly expressive language for you to program provable compute is 20 years away, but it's happening in 2021, 2022. So that's been a miracle, and we all know the language is super young, and there's no generic type. It's really hard to build really modular program that can scale well, etc., etc. But it's a very young language. So
I just want to point out one thing also, like if you want to create type Cairo, instead of just to improve that, you can do it. Just not saying it. So random copy.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Guilty that it is, what the language is able to accomplish is pretty amazing. Even yesterday though, I was talking to Open Zeppelin, and there's so many limitations. They're pushing for so many new features, like when strings, and but I think when strings. But I think we believe that the language will evolve, and as the language gets better, it's going to get easier for users to onboard. It's going to be hard right now. Like there is a lot of things that people aren't used to from traditional languages, but I think what you can accomplish using the language and where the space is going, I think it's still a valuable skill set to learn. Cool.
Maybe you have
I mean,
comment?
I don't have a lot of to say about that. I can just speak from the point of view of the dynamics that I see with developers. That is nice to see new types of applications. So people that are building in Solidity, they have somewhat close-mindedness because they have a lot of things to use already. And in Cairo, there is a lot of new types of applications. It's nice to see, like people are thinking, like from first principles.
And so this is going to be like the last question. I just want to make also one comment, more like a meta comment based on Cairo, which is people, tends to think that when you getting early into into new language is stupid because things will get better over time, right? Like it seems like the natural way of thinking, but that's actually a very dumb way of thinking. And the reason is, I like to always say it's better to be early than to be great. Which means that if you are a great dev somewhere else today, you're going down from DeepMind, you're coming from OpenAI, I don't care where you're coming from, and you tell me, oh, I want to get in Web3, and you say, you know what, I'm going to get I'm going to learn Solidity because that's what everyone uses. Then you're missing the point. You are missing the point because you're going to face the other DeepMind guy and the other Google guy and the Facebook guy, when on a new environment where the tech is super interesting, you won't be early. And regardless of if you're, not great, maybe you come from, you're a self-learner, but then you'll be bad, and everyone is bad. Like the language is 9 months old, everyone is bad. And so you will learn from the bottom, like everyone else, and you'll be great when everyone will be interested. Being early is better than being great, truly. So I guess we kind of finished the question, the panel itself. Maybe we have questions in the assembly. So if anyone wants to ask a question to anyone of those guys, feel free. Yes, there is one question here. Can we get the mic?
Thoughts on transpiling from Solidity versus native Cairo?
Solidity. So,
Proving my point.
I think in Cairo terms.
Well, I can't say, but personally, I haven't tried Solidity to the web transpiler. But what I can say is that there's a lot of things that fundamentally we are building Cairo programs, which things like for example having cheap computation. When I write in Solidity, I build my applications thinking, even computations, it's going to have a cost. Like I write my Solidity like that, But in Cairo, knowing the limitations of, knowing the benefits and advantages we have, we can write our Cairo like that. And I think writing in the language native, knowing what the language is capable of, I think that's going to have its advantages.
Comments? Any more question?
I guess I'll touch briefly upon that. I think, I see a lot of I think Cairo is a language very it was built to be very suited to zero knowledge circuits, and so I think it's going back to the Solidity side. It's not unless you want to port something over, then maybe for the convenience sake, it might be transpiling it might be worth it and reconfiguring the code afterwards. But if you want to build natively and you can take full advantage of Cairo as a language and take full advantage of the circuit itself, then I think Cairo is just the way to go.
Any more questions? Any question about timeline? Okay, there is 2 questions here, and also from it's closer. And also because still we can wait.
So I'll put the ImmutableX team on the hot seat again after last night. I already did, but when no, that's already done. Have some of that. But the question is, so StarkNet and ImmutableX. So you're on StarkX now. separate instance. Any plans on moving over to the general Starknet infrastructure?
Yes.
Yeah, so, like, the way we operate right now is that we're operating in StarkX. An amazing solution, it's application specific. It's given us a lot of benefits in terms of like being able to support very simple primitives that NFTs and games need, which is like minting, trading, etc. I think I kind of touched upon like how we see the Web3 gaming space specifically progressing over time. There's like this shift from like this very simple economies, which we have already supported, to the more complex economies and the more complex mechanics that MatchboxDAO has been working on as well. And I think for us, it's about offering like the optionality, right? So we're not here to like migrate from one to another, but rather we will provide like this suite of products, right, in parallel. And whatever the use case of our customers are, whatever the use case of the games may be, they don't have to worry. They can use it out of the box. They can compose it with other applications and other engines. Right, and essentially, like, we want to facilitate this NFT ecosystem, right? We want to be part of this narrative that goes from simple to complex to bringing on-chain mechanics. And so, hope that answers the question.
I can also make one comment, which is, we pushed a paper called Fractal L3s. And I mean, people think it was just going to replicate stuff like that. But I think the right framework to think about it is Cosmos. It's just, Cosmos is a network of interoperable chain through like lines of verification on the chain. L3s are more like a hierarchical scaling, where you have like a second layer which is more higher important than yours. And actually, the Thresh guys were not here, who actually agree with me here, but it's more in detail. What I'm saying is, the Cosmos environment today managed to create a thriving environment regardless of the fact that there's one company building the tech. And I don't see why it couldn't go the same way for such a collaboration. Sylv, you're up.
Exact same question.
So you're not up. No, you're not up. Sit. You can rest. Any more questions?
I'll ask another one. What about physics directly in Starknet? So some of the early implementations of that have been interesting, but when you look at the physics capabilities of say an Unreal 5, realistically, what's your thought of how that evolves in the Starknet environment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that experts from game industries that have witnessed how game architectures evolve over the past 40 years can articulate better than I do. But I think that a lot of the game engine decisions are essentially about cutting corners to be able to work with the frameworks that the game mechanics require. And it's, in our opinion, is not aligned with building persistent worlds autonomously enforcing itself, being adaptive, and can outlive any one of us. And so I think that to build physics on chain actually doesn't mean looking at how Unreal Engine, etc., handles physics and transpile them into native Cairo, but about rethinking what physics is actually. And this can go very philosophical very quickly, but I think that a lot of the thing that we call physics is actually our mental model from observing the universe. And so I see that rigid body have elasticity, and so I put a number that basically describes the elasticity, and I have all sorts of functions that can take that number and convert that into various dynamics, etc. But this is essentially starting from our observation and then put something in the game engine that can manifest whatever we understand. I think building on chain is more about finding those generative functions that can manifest itself into observable physical quantities. And so this is a completely different way of building things. The mental model that we have is similar to how the AI industry actually helps us understand our consciousness better, as we start to realize maybe our consciousness is just a subset of all the possible families of consciousness, etc. I think building worlds on chain will help us understand that maybe this reality is just a subset of what can be built, what can be generated.
That's so. I mean, that's. Yes. But I do want to comment. So on more like a technical level, which I don't understand how physics engine work. I mean, I can imagine how it works, but I can't really understand how Unreal works, for instance. But what I can say is, when it comes to proof adds up like a login factor to the computation you're running. So let's say you have like this computation of step n, we're proving it with like n log n. But today when we do proof ourselves, Starknet, so StarkX on Ethereum, we run specific parameters trying to optimize for running on Ethereum, where everything is expensive. And when you start to have recursive proof, then you can start to play around with the parameters of how proof works. You can make them faster to compute, but much wider. You can make them recursive and make it smaller. You can parallelize through recursion, like they can always start rebuild thread basically. And so the dimension of what DK brings to computation and the flexibility that Starks provide, as in my opinion, not even being discussed yet. No one realizes it. No, everyone keeps saying Stark proof are 20 kilobytes because they read it in the paper from 2018. Today, a Stark proof is much more than that, and they don't even look at the evidence on chain. So I'm gonna answer more on the tech side, which is let's see and wait. We're gonna see, and I will be surprised by how fundamental proof generation will be in the future. And at some point, we might have even hardware in our CPUs, in our chip, optimizing for it. Any more questions? I think it's maybe the last one. I guess we are finished. Thank you very much for attending, and please, if any question, come talk to us.